as I say, this was one of the things that really sold me on the whole meditative endeavor initially, was, wow, there's this taste of this concentrated state. And I can see as I work on it, it deepens and I'm able to maintain it in more and more complex situations. And I'd always liked working on things. I'd always liked developing things, skills, stuff like that. So it's like, this is cool, I can develop this. It is intrinsically fulfilling. It makes uncomfortable experiences less problematic. And it's known all over the world. It's like really cool. I'm linked to people from very different cultures, from very different belief systems, but they shared this practice. They had a word for it. They understood I'm doing the same thing they did. And that was sort of cool to feel connected in that sense to a worldwide phenomenon. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi has been able to actually demonstrate with credible research this intrinsic reward that goes with tasting high concentration. And he coined a word for it. There's good news and there's bad news. The good news is it's a great word. That means the intrinsic reward that goes with high concentration. So that's the good news. The bad news is, unfortunately, it's the same word that I use for a different phenomenon. So that could cause some confusion for people working within my system. Mihai wrote a book with the title. So what does he call it?
Flow.
Flow, yeah. And if you talk about a flow state among people that are interested in consciousness or this kind of thing, they'll know that that refers to that. Now in my system it refers to working with change and energy and that kind of thing. Now they're of course not entirely unrelated, because as you get more and more focused, there's more and more of a tendency to be aware of how things change and the underlying energies and forces. But conceptually, in basic mindfulness and in positive psychology, flow refer to things that are distinct, but it's the same word that's used in English. There is another term that's commonly used in the athletic world for states of high concentration. And do you know what that term is? Zone, be in the zone, and so forth. So there are colloquial words for this in ordinary English. Because it's such an important phenomenon, both in terms of sensory issues of being more fulfilled, suffering less, and in terms of objective performance abilities, it's an important notion. So I think it's useful to create a definition of concentration power. My definition of concentration power, or just concentration for short, is the ability to attend to what you consider to be relevant at a given time. So notice what I said, the ability to attend to what you consider to be relevant. So you decide what's relevant, right, at a given time. And what's relevant for you might not be relevant for some other person. Also, at one time something is relevant, at another time some other thing is relevant. Often in the definition of concentration, there is a mention of restricting the attention, narrowing the attention. That's not in my definition of concentration. Certainly it's true that there are contractive flavors of concentration. If you place your attention on the breath going in and out at your nostrils, or the sensation of your abdomen rising and falling, those are very small touch sensations. And if you hold your attention there, you have now deemed that small sensation to be what's relevant. Your attention wanders, you bring it back, wanders, you bring it back. So yes, that is a contractive flavor of concentration, and there's a place for that. However, let's say that you were to intentionally create a positive image. At the very same time, intentionally create some internal talk that matched that image, and talk that you repeated like a mantra over and over again. And at the same time, were to generate positive emotional feeling related to that image and that talk. And you were to spread your awareness over all three of these sensory phenomena simultaneously and hold that. That would be a very expansive flavor of concentration. You'd be filling your entire subjective space with awareness. But that would develop the same flavor, the same taste, as you would get by focusing in a very small part of your experience. So my teacher, Sasaki Roshi, says everybody thinks that samadhi means narrowing the focus. But you have to understand there are two flavors of samadhi: contractive samadhi and expansive samadhi. If you're driving the car, what's by and large relevant is the touch sight sound. The touch meaning the physical linkage with the car, sights meaning the sights of the road, sounds meaning the sounds of the road. What's largely relevant in driving the car is touch, sight, sound, which is actually a fairly broad focus. And once you understand this, you can drive in rush hour traffic for 2 hours, arrive at your destination, and you'll be in the same state of deep repose as if you had had your awareness focused on the tip of your nose for 2 hours in formal seated practice without the attention wavering. It would be no less of a deep experience, even though it was a very large and complex piece of a sensory event. Another misconception is that in order to develop concentration, you're always going to be fighting with yourself, because other things come up and you have to sort of push them away or push them down in order to hold on to the thing that you're concentrating on. I spent many, many years wrongly practicing concentration. Without realizing it, I was subtly trying to suppress things. I would decide what I wanted to focus on. In my early period of practice, that was typically the breath. I would be focusing on the breath, and then when other things would come up, without realizing it, I was subtly tensing around them. I was subtly trying to push them out of awareness. I was subtly trying to push them down. I had this subliminal agenda that was aversive to anything that was a distraction. And that creates tension, and that dissipates energy, and that hurts. It's uncomfortable. And what we want is that the concentration practice be a positive feedback loop. The more focused you are, the better you feel. And if you have these subtle tendencies, or maybe not so subtle tendencies, to be fighting with the things that aren't inside your focus, or in some way like tensing around them, pushing them down, not wanting them to be there, that makes it an uncomfortable experience to focus. You're literally fighting with yourself. And you have to sort of be careful and train yourself to focus on what you deem relevant without sort of rejecting all the other stuff.